All right, guys, welcome to Looks Saigon episode 26. And 25 was this morning, actually.
Already?
Yeah, but it was just audio, no video.
Oh, okay. How many of them are video?
I would say maybe like 80% of them.
Okay, cool.
I think so, yeah, because I was just learning how to use all the equipment and stuff. It's pretty new to me.
Good.
But
cool.
I'm learning now.
All right.
Yeah. So we recorded before, but for that episode, I didn't have my mics plugged in. Even though we sound checked.
I remember that, yeah.
I didn't actually plug it in when we recorded.
Yeah.
So maybe just like a short recap.
Yeah, sure. Never hurts to do a little sound check before.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
This is on, right?
You know, that's comparable to a photographer that forgets to put the flash card in, right? It's
right. This time,
we all make that mistake.
let me double check your
Yeah.
mic. There's a blue light, right? Yeah, it's just on. Okay, yeah, we're good this time.
I wonder if it's better over on this side.
Cool. I think it should be okay.
Yeah.
So just like a short recap, like
Sure.
How did we meet? I don't know if we went over that the last time. How did we meet?
I don't remember. I don't remember if we did it last time. I don't remember how we met.
Well, we met through P.
We met through, P, sure.
Yeah.
So we met through the group, right?
Yeah.
He invited you
Yeah.
to come and join us because he was one of the early guys. There were maybe 4 of us back then.
Mm.
And yeah, he invited you to come and
It's a crazy story because like maybe a year before I met you, I was at Kafka and they had books there to read in that time, and one of them was Teach Yourself Zen.
Ah, okay.
So
Perfect.
I was reading through it, and there was one part that I think it said something like maybe you are the entire universe, right? But if you are the entire universe, then whoever you think you are is not real. And then that kind of scared me in that moment, and I was like, oh crap. But I usually like to watch scary movies, so I was like, okay, I want to find out. I'm kind of curious.
And I didn't scare you? If that book scared you, I must have scared you a lot more.
The thing is, like, after I read that book, I knew a monk that had Facebook.
You knew what?
A monk
Yeah, okay.
that had Facebook, and I met him when I first came to Vietnam. He was a student in my teacher training program.
Okay.
So I contacted him, and I was like, "Hey, can you help me understand what Zen is?" And then he said, "Oh yeah, come to my temple, and we'll hang out." So I went to his temple in Phu Nhuan,
Okay.
and he invited me to his room to have dinner with him and his friends. And actually, it was him and 3 girls, and one of those girls was Luan, who later was my girlfriend.
Uh-huh.
But anyways, that day we just hung out. We ate pho, vegetarian pho. Didn't even talk about Zen at all. Just played guitar and hung out. And as I was leaving after the day was over, he said, "Oh hey, take these books and read this."
Where in Phu Nhuan?
It's in some back alleys. I couldn't tell you the actual street name.
It wasn't off of Batang Hai, and then you take a street off of Batang Hai.
It's not far from Phan Xích Long.
Ah, okay, no, completely different area.
Somewhere, yeah.
Okay.
So he gave me these books, and the first one that I read from his list that he gave me, or from his little batch of books, was Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle.
Yeah.
And then that got me into this rabbit hole that I was stuck for a year before I met you. So by the time I met you, I had this massive headache. I've been burning out, trying to find this puzzle or whatever. And actually, I mentioned this to to P, and then P was like, "Oh, you should meet my friend."
Oh, okay.
And then that's how we met at the Melbourne cafe, I think, the first time.
Yeah, I don't remember which cafe it was. I was kind of floating around to different cafes back then.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure which one.
P sent you to the wrong address first. But then we met up at the Melbourne cafe. And then when I asked you some questions how to deal with jealousy or something like that, and you said well, first of all, don't put yourself in a situation where you can get jealous, I think. But we were talking about something like that, but the things you were saying matched the stuff that I was reading.
Okay.
That I didn't know what to label that stuff that I was reading, so I just called it that thing that I like to read about. But then later I found out that it's also been labeled as non-dualism.
Okay,
right?
okay.
So
Gotcha.
I found that out through you guys, through your group.
Cool.
Yeah, that was a really cool experience.
Wow, how long ago was that?
Before COVID, right?
I was going to say, can we measure it by COVID? It was pre-COVID, so
It was pre-COVID.
that's so it had to be late Like it had to be very early 2020.
I think it was early 2020.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Long time already.
Time flies.
And we're still messed up.
How long in total have you lived in Vietnam? Because you've been like in and out, right?
Yeah, I started traveling here in 2001 on a vacation and fell in love with the place and decided to come back and photograph it. And I wasn't even a photographer. I just was so moved by the countryside. I said, I want to photograph Vietnam. And bought a camera and came back. And I did that I traveled back and forth through 2003. And then in 2003, I broke my leg up in Sapa doing photographs, caught in a rainstorm.
Wow.
And it took me about a year to heal. And then as soon as my leg was better, in 2004, I moved here. So permanently in 2004, in October.
Okay.
And then I went for 6 months in India in 2011, 2012. Then I moved to India in 2016 to stay.
Yeah.
But after 2 months, I had a big motorcycle accident and ended up having to come back here to recuperate because I lived in the Himalayas and I couldn't walk for a month. And after that, it was like, I am not going to do well where everything is like this. So I came back where Saigon, everything is like this. Yeah, and then in last year in April, I moved to India quasi full-time, only because my visa here after 18 years didn't get renewed.
Yeah.
And the same week that they turned my visa down here, my 10-year visa in India was reinstated. It's within 2 days. And Vietnam only gave me 12 days to leave. So I had to make a really quick decision and said, well, if Vietnam doesn't want me, India apparently does. So
it sounds like the synchronicity, right?
But yeah, totally. I am really convinced that it was all no other choice. Well, I could have made a different choice, but I would have paid consequences, I know.
It was like a highly suggested option. It's like, hey.
It was like, hey, dummy, if you know what's good for you, go.
What brought you to Vietnam in the first place? Just for tourism?
My vacation and tourism, yeah. And I just absolutely, I did the typical tourism route, from Saigon to Hanoi and Ha Long Bay and Sapa and all of that. And I absolutely fell in love with the countryside. And I really did just say, I want to photograph this place.
Like, at what moment did that hit you? Like that feeling?
Oh, by the end, I came for 1 month. And near the end of the month, when I came back towards Saigon, I said, what I want to do is I want to do a photo book on Vietnam for the U.S. with absolutely nothing to do with the war.
Right.
Because at that point, people would say, why are you going to Vietnam? Because everybody's picture was just the war.
Yeah.
And I said, wow, they're so far beyond the war. I want to capture the people and the countryside and make no mention of war whatsoever. Like, that's gone, that's done. Yeah, so I went back and I took a weekend course in a botanical garden, bought a little Canon camera, and came back the next year and spent 2 months here, and then went back, processed all my film, and then came back here again a second time, and I did that like 4 or 5 trips in the first 2 or 3 years. And then I realized it's like, wow, I'm loving this. And I'm quite unfulfilled with my business in the U.S., which I had a real estate business.
Oh, really?
And I was both buying and selling and remodeling for myself.
Okay.
And I said, I'm making really good money off of this, but
it's boring.
It doesn't feel like it's what I should be doing. So, and I said, my early years I was an athlete, believe it or not. My middle years I was a businessman. The one thing I hadn't been was an artist. And my dad was an incredible painter, a real visionary, and I sucked. I can't draw 2 straight lines. So I said, maybe a camera will work instead.
But you can see what good art looks like.
Yeah, I guess I had his eyes. That's what I'm thankful for, is he gave me his eyes, because I was totally learned by myself, and I didn't know any of the rules, but I just looked through the camera, saw what I liked, and I took a picture of it. I thought it was going to be terrible, because I never processed anything in Vietnam, because back then the photo labs were really bad here. So I waited and I took all my stuff back to the U.S. and I'd shoot like 150 rolls every trip. So it was film back then.
Yeah.
And the studio that I took it to, the pro studio, said, "Oh, this is really good." Said you should enter some competitions. So I sent to one national magazine that I just saw they were having a photo competition, and I sent to them 3 photos, and they wrote me back a really nice letter and said, "We're so sorry, your entry was beyond the deadline, so we can't include you in it, but would you allow us to use one of the pictures on the cover of our magazine?
Cool.
And we'll pay you."
Nice.
Wow, if I can make money off of this, I'm doing this.
That was your first time making money from photography?
Yeah.
Cool.
So that convinced me that it's like, okay, you love this, go do it. So, and I knew I couldn't do it in the U.S. The U.S. is very, you're 40 years old and you have never been a photographer and you want to do this now, we won't let you. You know, where Vietnam, I could see that as a foreigner especially, we're really lucky in that we can come here and say we can do anything and they'll give you a chance. You have to back it up with results, but at least they give you the chance. So I said, okay, if I want to do photography, I really should be in Vietnam where I can lie my way through it and they'll let me do it.
This is a good place to be.
Yeah, it was wonderful. I never would have been able to accomplish what I accomplished here in the U.S.
Cool. Why did you decide to move to India? Like, in total, you lived there
3 times.
3 times.
I've been there in total now about not quite 2 years. The first time was for my physical health. I wanted to do. I had another business here in Vietnam, very big, very exciting business, with one Vietnamese partner and 2 Singaporean partners, and I created the company, and it was going full tilt towards the realization of our project, and in 24 hours it completely fell apart because of one of the political scandals back then. This was 2010. And there was a big battle between the president in Hanoi and the prime minister in Saigon. And our investors were all aligned with the prime minister, and he lost. So in 24 hours, all money dried up.
Jeez.
And it killed, literally in 24 hours, we were out of business.
Jeez.
And I was so angry, and I was so stressed out. So enough with Vietnam, I'm leaving. And I went to India to do an Ayurvedic treatment called Panchakarma, which is like a cleansing, a detox.
Yeah.
Right? But it's really intensive, and it's
Like
23 days long.
and spiritual? Or?
Yeah, mostly, more physical, but there was definitely a spiritual aspect, but I wasn't interested in the spiritual. I just wanted to go and detox.
Yeah.
So I went, I did that, and afterwards, I was only planning on, I had a 6-month visa, but I was only planning on staying a month for the detox and then come back to Vietnam. And at the end of it, the doctor said, "So what's your plans now?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to go back to Vietnam." He said, No. You have to stay, relax for 14 days, be very quiet, very calm, otherwise you'll ruin all the work we just did on you for the last 23 days. I said, okay, where should I go? I knew nothing about India at that point. And after that, I was having lunch in the canteen, and my favorite doctor, who had disappeared for a couple of weeks, showed up. Synchronicity. He sat down and said, "How are you doing? How did it all go?" We talked, and then
he showed up to the canteen.
He showed up at the canteen the day, like the last day,
Yeah.
And I said, "Yeah, I feel good." But the head doctor just told me to go someplace and chill for 2 weeks, and I have no idea where to go and no idea how to get there. And he said, "Oh, hey, I'm going to this place called Rishikesh tomorrow. Come with me." And I said, "Well, what's Rishikesh?" He said, "It's the yoga capital of the world, and it's along the Ganga River, and it's really quiet and peaceful. Perfect place to chill." So I said, okay,
Another suggestion.
That was like, the universe saying, the doors just opened like that. Once I got in India, it started being, the doors open without me doing any effort.
It's like doors open, but then it's up to us to actually go through it.
Yeah, sure. The door opens, but we have to walk through it. So I went to Rishikesh with him, and I'll try to make this a short story, because it's really, I wouldn't tell the story except it's packed with these synchronicities. He said, I'm taking the vice president of marketing for the biggest Ayurvedic pharmaceutical company in India with me. We have a presentation to 150 Western doctors on how to read pulse in Rishikesh. So come with us, and in fact, if you want, I'll teach you how to read pulse. So I got there with them, and we checked in. The place, it was during the yoga festival, so every hotel ashram was booked solid. They had rooms, I didn't. And he said, don't worry about it, let me talk to the head of this big ashram there. And the guy came back and he said, oh, you're a friend of them, you're family, we'll take care of you, don't worry. Cool. So they ended up giving me a fantastic room right on the Ganga River. And my doctor friend said, okay, meet in the morning in my room and we'll get going, we'll start. So in the morning I woke up, I went to his room, and he was packing his suitcases. And I said, aren't we going to breakfast and then you're having your conference? He said, no. And I said, well, what's going on? He said, somehow, we don't know how, but my secretary thought it was January 10th, but it was February 10th. So he and I have to go back. And I said, oh, wow, okay, so should I go? Please? No, you stay here. I already talked to the manager of the ashram. He'll take care of you. Everything is taken care of. Enjoy your stay here.
Wow.
So they stayed one night and had to go back, and I got to be there to do my chill out. And everything happened. Like, I just started meeting all these people totally serendipitously or synchronistically, I got introduced to Muji, who I had no idea who he was,
cool.
Through like a friend of a friend, and
Did you guys do just like hang out, have some tea or something?
no, I met him he was giving satsang.
Okay.
And I got to know him. I spent 3 weeks with Muji, going to all of his satsangs.
And by this time you were already into spirituality, right?
I was really, well, I had been, because I've been studying what we call the Ageless Wisdom teachings since 1990. So I had a long history of it, but it really wasn't related to India. It was more Eastern Europe and Zen Japanese, but not like non-dualism by Indian terms, right?
Like not Advaita.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And so a week later, a woman that I knew in the compound where I lived said, my friend and I are going to this place called Gangotri, which is up at the source of the Ganga River, the glacier. Would you like to come with us? I said, sure, we have a really nice car, because I was wondering, I wanted to explore, but I didn't know where, and, the buses were pretty rugged. And she said, yeah, we have a beautiful car, come with us.
Nice.
So the three of us went up there. Same thing as they knew this little ashram up there with a real cool old Baba. Same thing, he treated me like family right away because I was with them. 2 days later, the one woman, who is the oldest one of us, said, I can't stay here. I hate the altitude, I can't handle I want to leave. So like in a few hours she left. And then a couple days later, my friend who invited me up, who had a car accident many years ago and had vertebrae damage, she got really sick, vertigo, and she said, I have to go back to Rishikesh and see my doctor. So she left. Again, I'm left alone with the guy in the ashram saying, no, your family, we take care of you, don't worry, you stay. So, I got a trip to Rishikesh, grace of some people, I free and easy and really pleasant, and met fantastic people. Then I wanted to go to the source of the Ganga, and somebody just showed up and invited me to go with them without knowing that I wanted to do that. And then they had to turn around within a few days and leaving me alone again. So the only one who benefited from both of those trips were me. And I said, this is life, right? This is the flow saying,
right.
You just go. And my whole first trip was like that. Even getting out, because I almost got stranded. I was at the source of the Ganga, and I wanted to go back to Rishikesh, I remember it was the 16th of June. And a good friend of mine who is a priest up there said, I have a farm nearby, about 40 kilometers. Stay a little while longer. I'll take you to the farm and you can relax there and enjoy my farm.
Like a Hindu priest?
Yeah. And I said, no, I need to get back to Rishikesh. He said, oh, come on, stay. You know, it's really nice. I said, no, I have to go. So I left. I came back to Rishikesh. And 2 days later, they had one of the biggest storms up there they ever had. And the river, a whole town got washed out. And he was stranded for 2.5 weeks. They had to airlift him out by helicopter.
Oh my gosh.
So again, it was like, something just said, no, go back for the 16th.
It was like a gut feeling that you should go back.
I can't even say it was a gut feeling. It was just, I knew I had to go back on the 16th.
Cool.
So the whole trip was like that. The second trip in 2016, I was going to do a yoga photography business there, leave Vietnam permanently. And I had the same kind of experiences, but I refused them. My ego was saying, no, but I just moved here. I took all this time to find an apartment and set up, find where I could use a photo studio and organize my life. I'm staying. Because I had kind of a message, like, you can go back to Vietnam. I said, no way, I'm staying. 4 days later, I'm riding my motorcycle on a photo shoot around the mountains, and I come around a blind corner and there's a bus coming, and the bus hits me. And, I ended up in a ashram hospital in India and couldn't walk for a month. And then I said, I have to go back to Vietnam because it'll be too difficult for me to heal like this. So same thing as, I had the message clear. It's like, go back to Vietnam now. And I refused. So it took a bus. I came back to Vietnam by bus, but I had to cross an ocean by bus to get there.
It's a very strong suggestion.
Yeah. And the cool thing was one of my goals in 2016 was to meet a Zen teacher. And I came back to Vietnam to recover, and I was in an Indian restaurant a few months later here. And a woman walked in that I had met once before, and she said, you're a photographer, right? I said, yes. She said, there's a real cool pagoda in Phu Nhân. I think it would be a really nice place to do photos. You should check it out. And they have this young monk who speaks English. He's really cool. Go meet him. So I met him, hit it off immediately. About 3 weeks later, he called me one day and he said, I want to go and visit this old master in the jungle near Baria. I'd like your opinion of him because I want him to be my new master. Would you come with me?
Cool.
So I went and immediately hit it off with the old Zen master. And then I was thinking, I went to India to meet a Zen master, and I had to get hit by a bus sending me back to Vietnam to eat Indian food in that restaurant, to meet this woman that introduced me to this monk who speaks English, who introduced me to my Zen master.
That's amazing.
So I learned the hard way, that when you get that, I can't say it's a message, but when the doors open, you walk through them. You don't hesitate.
It's like faith, right? Like having faith.
Yeah. It really became that. In Christianity, they say, "Let go and let God." It's like, okay, that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm not going to listen to my ego because that gets me in trouble every time.
Yeah. I'm glad you survived that bus.
Me too. I was really lucky for sure. If it had been head on, I would have been dead. But I managed to move just enough that I hit the side of the bus. So it threw me into the bus, over the handlebars, over the street. But at least I didn't have the full force.
Man, that was close. Now we come back to the main reason why I wanted to have this recording was the topic of Ikigai.
Okay.
It's like a Japanese concept.
Yeah.
That I have the diagram here. It's like, I guess it's 4 things: what you love, what the world needs, what you can get paid for, and what you're good at. And where all of these things intersect, they call that Ikigai.
Yes.
And
you may know more about it than I do. I really haven't studied it that much, but I'm familiar with it. And if you ask me or talk to me what you want to talk to me, and maybe I can relate that to the Advaita approach and see how they fit.
I mean, it sounds kind of like you're already living it, right? Like with your photography. I mean, do you get paid for photography, something meaningful
When
for
I had
you?
my business here, yeah, for sure.
I don't know, like, about non-dualism. It is what you love. You're good at it. The world does need that. I don't know if you could pay for that or not.
I could, but I chose not to.
Or maybe it combines with the photography into one thing.
It could be. That's a possibility. Sorry. My first teacher, I come from a line of teachers that said, you don't make money off of these teachings. They don't belong to you. Your job is to just pass them on. And since they're not yours, and from a practical standpoint is once you make it a livelihood, then like every business that we ever have, if we're not meeting our goals, we'll look and say, can I change my message to appeal to a bigger market? Right? And the danger with these teachings as a business is, if you're not getting the results you want, will you compromise the purity of the teachings in order to make the money you want? So my decision was, I could either figure out how can I make more money to meet my way of living, or how can I lower my way of living so that I don't have to? And I chose, how can I simplify my life so I can give this instead of have to make money off it?
Damn, I had something right now. I just went. There's some people that label themselves as like Zen money coaches, and they talk about like money EQ.
Okay.
How like, I guess like when we spend money, sometimes like we'll feel some kind of pain, like, oh no, I just lost that money, or when we get it, then we feel good. I guess like the Zen money coaches will try to help you understand why your emotions are connected to your money to a point where you feel happy to give it out, I guess.
I don't know about that specifically. There certainly is. In fact, my Zen master, once there was a group of Tibetan Buddhists that were visiting, and he said, "Yeah, that's kind of business Buddhism. They're really about how to make you successful in business." Which nothing wrong with that, but that wasn't what
Right.
what he and I were there for. Zen, like everything else, Kabbalah in the 2000s. They all, if they increase in popularity, then there is always a trendy movement of it, and you get maybe some Hollywood stars that'll get involved in it, and then they glamorize it, and then all of a sudden people want to make money off of it and make it a commodity. So it's not surprising that all spiritual traditions have been manipulated for personal gains. So yeah.
I feel like a lot of people are like spending time on things that they don't want to do to make money, and I think maybe now this is why this concept has been kind of like playing in my mind recently. The whole Ikigai thing, like doing something that you actually like, that also helps other people, that generates income so you can have a house to live in.
Yeah. It's a really good point that you bring up. Two things I can say about it. One, my first teacher, his name was George, so I can say George instead of my first teacher. He used to say he was very much a spiritual facilitator, is what he called himself. He never said he was a teacher, a master, or anything. He was a very humble man. But he said in order to evolve, meaning going up the ladder of spirituality, one must first fully involve. Now what he meant by that is you have to come from the heavens where we began, come down to the earth, be material, and succeed. Do the things that we have to do on the earth, get a career, make money, family if that's important to you. You can't shortcut the process. Because oftentimes what happens is somebody, they can't make it in the real world, right? They can't make it in business or in their personal life, so they say, I'm going to go to India and become a spiritual person. I said, you can't do that. If you don't fully integrate with the world, you won't be successful integrating with the spiritual world, because there's a reason that we come down to what do we say, colloquially, you know, we have to do the work here in the physical world, and then once we accomplish that, then we have the foundation, because it takes a lot of inner strength to do the spiritual work. You know? And what usually lacks in us in not being successful in the world is inner strength, not intelligence, you know, not physical capabilities, but the fortitude to do it. And the reality is that the spiritual path is in many ways more difficult than the material path, even though there's nothing tactile about it.
It's
right?
scary.
So he really stressed it. He said, don't shortcut the process thinking you don't have to do your work here in the material world. So that fits your comment. The other one was, whatever you do, somebody could decide that they have no interest in spirituality. Right? They can still be a more awakened human being than the one that says, oh my God, I'm going to follow my guru and do all this. If, referring back to what you're talking about, whatever you do with your life, you do it for other people. You do it because you care and you have compassion. You do it because you want to spread love. You do it because you want to create beauty. You could be a butcher, right? And if you gave yourself to being a butcher, and you were a butcher to serve other people, that's a very spiritual path. You may never go meet a guru, but if you live your life, the combination with what you can do in this world, right? If you live your life in service to others than yourself, that's being a spiritual person. That's enough.
I feel like many people are scared to like leave their job and do the thing that is meaningful for them, but maybe sometimes it's hard to do that, right? You have a family to feed.
Yeah, there are certainly factors in it. Again, George had a wonderful saying. He said, if you learned everything there was to know about chicken feathers, right? Chicken feathers, and you gave chicken feathers your entire life, chicken feathers would take care of you. Might not give you the biggest house that you ever dreamed you could have, but it'll take care of you and your family. What he was saying is, if you give yourself to what is your passion, to what you really feel, not here, but feel here, to do in service, it may not make you rich, but it'll take care of you. That's the way life
specific,
works.
Right?
Yeah.
What would that be for you?
Well, I think for one, my photography. Well, in fact, my photography was certainly to share with people, you know, and it also gave me the income that I could leave and say, okay, I've done this, now I'm going to really do the spiritual journey and go live in a cave and go live in India and all those things. So it was a step in the process that led me to the fulfillment of it. But I'm sure if I just did my photography, the way it's evolved now, in fact, I can think of what George was talking about. In Advaita, we say that you're aware of, we say that there's just awareness, right? And everything appears out of awareness. And how does awareness show up in the world? It shows up in three ways. It shows up as love through the heart center, beauty through the eyes, and truth through the intellect. And if I look at the way my photography evolved, what I'm doing in my photography, I think, and the feedback I get is, I'm sharing beauty, I'm sharing love, and I'm sharing truth. I shoot things as I see them, with a nuance of how it could appear beyond the physical. And I always, even if I shoot what we might say a very negative scene, I try to show it in a beautiful way. Because in everything, whether in duality, right, in the dualistic world, not the non-dual philosophy, Everything is both, you know, good and bad, hot and cold, life and death, right? Ugly and beauty, ugly and beautiful. So when I see some, you know, I've done several photographs of some of the pollution in India, you know, and I really have done it in a way that people say, wow, what is that? It's beautiful. You know, so it's like, yes, it's ugly, but if you really look and you see the whole picture, there's beauty there too. So I always try to show even the negative in a beautiful way. And love, some people were, I did a big series on the sadhu in India, which are the men that give up all their possessions after they raise a family and they go to the spiritual path, right? And where I live, most of them are really beggars who dress up like sadhu because people treat sadhu really respectfully and well. And I was invited to a gathering of 150 of these sadhu to take photos of them while they were doing a big feeding. And I took a ton of pictures of them. And a couple of my friends said, you know, they're just beggars. Why do you take their pictures? And I said, you know, what I realized is, and I think what people see in my photos is, they don't see a beggar. I think what I capture that people connect with is they see love in the eyes of the people that I'm photographing. You just see something very pure. You don't see the personality. So in a way, when I think back to what George was saying and what Advaita teaches, is that's what I'm doing with my photography.
So I want to ask you, like, yeah, what do you want the viewers to see through your photos? But you said like love, truth, and wisdom.
Beauty.
Beauty.
But I don't want them to do that. I never plan that.
Okay.
I shoot what my eye connects with. I don't have an agenda for what I shoot. It's, in fact, it really was after maybe the first 4 or 5 months in India that people would come up to me and say, Indians would come up and say, oh, you know, we really love your photographer. You capture the culture, how it feels like to be an Indian, how it feels like to be a Hindu. And you must really understand our culture. And inside I was laughing because I know nothing about Hinduism. You know, but I photograph what touches me when I look through my camera. And it touches them in a way that they say, yeah, you're showing what life here is all about. But I don't plan it.
Cool.
It's by accident or by divination. I'm not sure which one.
The synchronicity just keeps
happening. For sure.
I have another question before we go. And it's kind of, I guess, a different topic. They could connect, I guess. It's about inner child.
Okay.
Yeah. Like, how would you define the inner child?
Okay, I'm going to go back to my first teacher, George, because he did seminars. There were 3 phases. The first one was 3 days, second one was 4 days, and the last one was 5 days. And they were about self-knowledge. He never talked about non-duality. I don't know if he ever knew what non-duality was, but it's what he was teaching.
How did you learn that label, by the way?
Non-duality?
Yeah.
I learned that on my first trip in India.
Okay.
When I went up to Rishikesh and I met Muji,
Okay.
and then I studied in an ashram up there for 6 months, Advaita Vedanta, and that's the teachings in the Vedas in Hinduism about non-duality.
Okay.
So that's where I was introduced to
Cool.
it. But
George, right?
George, yeah.
The seminars.
Yeah. There was quite a bit of work in the first one and a little in the second one on inner child work. So, and I worked with him for 12 years. He and I connected immediately, and after the first training I said, George, I want to give you support, you know, can I be on the staff? So I joined his staff for 12 years. Everybody was non-paid, you know, and he began training me to be a facilitator.
Cool.
To continue from him because he had a disease that was eventually going to make it impossible for him.
Yeah.
But I had 12 years of dealing with people doing inner child work.
Wow.
So it's very powerful. I support it as a therapy completely. It has its limitations. It doesn't really fit in certainly in the traditional non-dual teachings, because in the real hardcore non-dual teachings in Advaita, the basic teaching from Ramana Maharshi, who you know well now after your trip in India, his teaching was that if you really got non-dualism and you found out who you truly are, the I am, right? Not the body and not the mind, but your nature, your essence, right? The reality of who you are, which is that awareness, then all ego problems would fall away. Therefore, there would be no inner child issue to deal with, because you would realize that the inner child was not you, right? It was no more you than the 5-year-old kid walking down the street right now while we're talking. There's no connection, right? It's a collection of memories, thoughts, right? Conditionings. So what is there to work on?
Right.
Now, the West has kind of modified and softened the hardcore Advaita teachings. And now most Western teachers like Rupert Spira, Adyashanti, I don't know about Francis Lucille, probably. They would say, don't expect just because you become enlightened that all your problems are going to go away. You're still going to have all your history to work through.
Yeah.
You still need to deal with these issues psychologically.
Is this what people call karma? Karma? Is that what that is?
Yeah, in one way you could say, I'll go with that. Yeah. Okay. That's another subject. But real briefly, there's that karma plays a place in that. So Western Advaita teachers would tend to say, work on the who am I, figure out who you really are, which is this awareness. Right? And then once you get there, you'll have a much clearer picture on how to deal with the residual psychological problems that we have. That they don't just disappear, because our memories don't just disappear. Right? Any more than, like, a good example would be a mirage. You grew up in America, you know what a mirage is, right? You know, and you see water far off in the distance, especially if you go across like a desert, right? Yeah. And if you're ignorant and you say, oh my God, I'm really thirsty, right? And I see water up there. So you speed up and you're driving, you're chasing the water, but you never get to it. And then somebody said, hey, silly, that's a mirage. It's not real. It's a law of physics that creates what looks like water.
And now that you said that, I feel like in that mirage, like, you think you see water because you want there to be water, right?
Well, you're certainly looking. It's very high. Yeah, water is high in your consciousness, right? Because you're thirsty. But even if you aren't thirsty and you're driving on the road, you're still gonna. If you drink a liter of water, you drive down the same road, you're still gonna see the mirage.
Yeah, I also see that.
Right. Sure. So, but what the mirage analogy is like is, now somebody told you, so you're aware now, right? You are enlightened in terms of a mirage. You know a mirage is not real. Do you stop seeing it?
Right,
it's still there, right? And psychologically, you're going to have to say, oh yeah, I remember it's a mirage, so I don't chase after it. In a way, the teachings are the same way. Is if, now this, again, more Western Advaita teachings, right? Is if I realize that I am pure awareness, certainly my suffering with that will be way reduced, and my long-term happiness will increase. But I'm still going to have what I think is my memory, right? My history,
like triggers.
Come back triggers that have been hardwired in us over decades, right? They don't just disappear, at least for Westerners, right? So we still need to work on them. But we work on them as the observer now, rather than as the victim. Yeah, I guess that's the way I would summarize it.
Cool.
In the beginnings of inner child work, we approach them as a victim. Our parents did this to us, our teachers did this to us, right? It injured me, right? As we grow up, and now if we get into like Advaita teachings, the non-dual teachings, is we say, okay, hold on. Is that really you? Right? Or are you the observer seeing a body and a mind that did have these events happen. Right? But the events never really touched you as the observer. And the observer is awareness. That's the real you that all non-dualism is guiding you to discover. So then we can say, just like, I'll give you a quick example. Right now there is a child that, in this very second, there's a child that just took its last breath in Africa. Miserable life of starvation, right? Are you crying right now?
No,
No. Does it ruin your day?
it doesn't.
If your girlfriend's little brother died of some terrible disease, painful, long disease, would it ruin your day?
Yeah, most likely.
Absolutely, right?
Yeah.
Or if it was your sister that died,
Yeah.
right? It would really wreck your life for the time being, right?
Yeah.
Why is it that the same event happens 15,000 miles away from you and you don't have a reaction? And it can happen in your house and you fall apart. The reason is that you aren't able to separate. There's no distance between you and the event. You and what appears to be, in this case, you. We're so identified with the body and the mind that anything that happens, especially when we're young, we take it personally. It happened to me. You know, one of the big things that we work through in inner child work is you're not the cause of it. Right? Typically, the little child thinks it's my fault that my father beat me up. Right?
Okay,
So we
I
say,
deserve that or something.
yeah, exactly. So we say, wait a minute, it's not your fault. You didn't do anything to deserve that. Somebody else is a problem, right? We do that on a much higher level with the non-dual teachings, in that we say, step back from your mind and your body and say, to short circuit this, whatever happens to the body doesn't happen to the real me. I am the observer. But when I take myself to be the body and the mind, then I'm the victim. So we need to step back, and when we create even a little gaps, we become the observer of our thinking, the observer of the body's actions. And then it's a little bit like the poor kid in Africa, right? Is you can look and say, that's terrible. You know, what we really need to do in the world to solve that problem is you think clearly, because you're not acting out of fear, anger, anguish, depression, stress, right? You can see things clearly. When you create that similar distance between you and the body and mind that you identify as you, you look and say, wait a minute, what really was going on there? Oh, my dad was an alcoholic. His dad beat him.
Yeah.
Right? We can pull ourselves away and find first compassion for the perpetrator.
Yeah.
Right? And then we find compassion for ourselves, and we can heal because now we have a distance and we see it more clearly. When we take it to be us, it's like the saying, you can't see the forest for the trees. We're so wrapped up in the event that we can't see clearly what really is going on. So Advaita would be about becoming the observer, stepping back. Now we can still say, okay, there is this psychological, hopefully not physical, but certainly psychological baggage, right? Now I can deal with it as the observer and say, okay, I can see clearly now what was going on. You know, maybe I can even see that my father really loved me, but he was in so much pain. This is how he reacted to his pain.
Yeah.
Because that's what he thought was normal. Now, that's the real inner child work. So is it valid? Absolutely, in the beginnings. And sometimes I've dealt with people that have said, you're not ready for a non-dual approach. You know, you do need, go find yourself a good therapist and work
step
through
by
this.
step.
Step by step. Step by step.
No rush.
Yeah. And then when you're ready for it, then look to the spiritual side of it. Some people can do it. I have a friend who suffered terrible abuse by her stepfather. And she actually checked out. I mean, she developed the ability to like do that, separate from her body, and immediately she started taking a spiritual path because
Wow.
of that. But for most of us, we needed to go in steps.
Great. This is really good. Before I change, I remember in the conversations between Krishnamurti and David Bohm, Krishnamurti would mention something like, as you, let's say, awaken or whatever, like, that your physical brain will actually change. Because I think I've also heard, like, if you experience, like, trauma and stuff, it does affects your brain circuitry or something.
Sure, we know that the brain has always been rewired through stressors and through chemicals. Yes.
So it's like as like we see more clearly, it's also like a rewiring, like a physical rewiring of your brain.
It's a good
Or untangling. I don't know how to define it.
You know, I did a photograph in Vietnam before I went to India, and it was a picture of these trees that have all the roots on the outside, you know, that are all twisted around. And I said, you can't solve the world's problems by untangling the world's problems. You can only solve it by untangling your mind.
Makes sense.
So that's kind of, now there is a chemical process that rewires and all that stuff, but I'm not a brain specialist.
Me neither.
But what was the comment that you wanted to make about that?
No, I think as it relates to like inner child, like I feel like as this supposed inner child heals, I feel like that rewires our physical brain.
It probably does, because certainly we know it changes the chemical makeup, right? And chemistry is what changes the neurons, I believe, the neural pathways. So that would make perfect sense.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Jeez. Oh my gosh.
It's cool because science and philosophy, with the beauty of quantum physics, is really starting to, through people like David Bohm and some others, is, you know, they're not enemies anymore.
Right.
They're kind of saying, okay, well, yeah, you know, you know what you're talking about in this world, and we know what we're talking in this world, but those worlds actually aren't quite as different as what we thought.
Right.
And quantum physics is starting to come back with the whole idea of nothingness, which is at the cornerstone of non-dualism. Right? Is that the nature of the world is emptiness, and people say, "Oh, how can everything come out of emptiness?" And it doesn't make any sense. And now quantum physics says everything comes out of nothing. If we look far enough down the rabbit hole, quarks, you know, atoms and then quarks and gluons and strings and all these things, they disappear. They're just probabilities until there's an observer effect. What's the difference between those two? You know, one is mysticism that says that the nature of the world is emptiness, and the other one is science saying the nature of matter is emptiness. They're agreeing.
Then we should encourage scientists to continue
Yeah,
looking.
oh, absolutely. I think that there's wonderful possibilities for the future, that the power struggle, the ego struggle, is diminishing, at least in certain areas of it. And they're seeing more eye to eye and saying, wait a minute, are we talking about the same thing?
Right. They're proving each other right.
Yeah, they're validating each other.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
All right. Before we go, so with some guests, I'll do this thing where we send shout outs
Okay.
to like our listening countries. I have it's about 10 countries right now that are listening.
10 countries?
Yeah, listeners in 10 different countries.
Ah, okay, cool.
That are listening. So I don't know if you want to do like for example, we have the Philippines. Like, is there anything that you would want to say to the Philippines or anybody listening in the Philippines?
Wow, you know, I can do this for all 10 at once.
Okay, yeah. Can I say the 10 first before you say
Sure.
that? Okay. So I think maybe it's more than 10, but so we got Philippines, UK, Taiwan, Japan, Canada, Australia, Mexico, Singapore, India, Vietnam, and US.
11.
Oh,
It's
11.
growing.
Okay, that's your number, right? That's your numerology number.
No, my numerology number is 33. But
Okay.
yeah. Okay, here's what I would say. Are you really a Filipino?
Right.
Are you really an American? Or is that a label that you've been living with and taking it to be you? That's what the non-dual teaching is all about, is there is no individual Filipino or Canadian or Italian. Right? There's just awareness, and awareness is showing up in the world through labels and forms, including the forms of countries. So I can say the same thing to everybody is, you aren't who you think you are. Really question, are you a Canadian, or is that where your body came into being?
Yeah.
And people stuck a label on it, a made up label. I mean, there are no, try to find the borders of Canada. Or, I mean, try to find the border between Canada and the US. It's man-made.
Yeah.
Even if there's a river, the river, one side is no different than the other. Right? It's all labels that are put on the illusion we call the world, which is a manifestation of awareness. So all those 11 countries, and every other country, we're all the same awareness, just showing up, having an experience through, through a body and a mind.
It's like every country itself is just a concept, like created by people. And each government does whatever they have to do to convince the people in that country to keep believing that this concept is something real.
Yeah, sure.
And they all use their own strategy.
Krishnamurti was one who really talked about the minute that you label yourself an Indian or an American, you create violence because you create separation.
Right.
And there is no real we look different, but the look is the appearance. It's not the reality of who we are.
Yeah.
Just like, these two cups, right? They look different, but they're just cup.
Yeah.
And really, they're just ceramic, right? If you shatter these into pieces, which become 150 different nations in the world, right? It's still just ceramic. Its nature is ceramic, right? It no longer has the form of a cup. The reality is that Canada is just a form of the planet. And the planet is just a form of matter. And we can take this all the way out through the cosmos. So, we need to get out of the thinking that I am this, I am this, I am this, I am this, I am this. And we reduce that through what we call negation, is we go back and say, wait, am I an American? No, that's a label where my body came into being out of the soil, right? Am I a man? That's really a label too.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Am I a human? Well, that's a label too, right? I'm a sentient organism made up of what everything else is made up of. Right? We can go all the way down the list, all the way back to the only thing that I can't break down anymore is pure awareness. So in the Advaita tradition, we would say, what you can't negate, what you can't break down, like the atom to the molecule of the atom to the protons and electrons, to the gluons and nuons, right? When you get to the point where you can't break it down anymore, that's who you are. And if we do that, then we realize that all these labels, all through time, that humans have been here, is we've just created with really complex, sophisticated labels that are hiding the real truth is that I can say one thing and it fits every being on the planet.
Okay, this is the last thing now for real. We keep opening new doors. Because now that you said man is just a label too, right? Like,
have your water.
Oh, thank you.
It's just a mirage.
Yeah. The movement that's happening right now, especially in the West, where people can change their pronouns, like he to she, or even to they, or I think even more now. So doesn't that prove that people can unidentify with a label? Because they already if someone changes from a he to she, then they've unidentified with he, but then just chosen another identification as she. But in non-dualism, they would just unidentify and just leave it at that, right?
Yeah. Well, ultimately, yes. For me, because I've been watching it from a distance, I'm not really close to it, but I see what's going on, and I don't agree with all of it. I think that there's some, from from a purely dualistic standpoint, there are some concerns in it. But I also think that it is an absolute, unavoidable aspect of the evolution of human consciousness. Is we're starting to break down labels.
Yeah.
And people are saying, wait, that doesn't define me. So I have no problem with that. I have a problem with medical intervention sometimes when maybe it isn't done, maybe it's done too fast, and I don't know enough about it to get involved in it.
Same.
But I always would have the concern, when doctors get involved in it,
Right.
you can create problems, right? But for me, it's like, yeah, it's one evidence of, we're starting to say, wait, the old labels don't define me anymore. So it's a step in the evolution. And it has to happen.
Yeah,
so when people are resisting it, they're just creating more suffering because it cannot not happen.
At least it's evidence that unidentification is possible, right?
Yeah. And if we... you see it in other areas. I think part of the problems in the West of the division of people, and they're taking separate identifications, right? Now it's more important now than ever that you're a conservative or a liberal, right? A Democrat or Republican in America. I think it's because the labels are starting to, it's like an earthquake is coming and you're getting minor tremors before the big earthquake. And I think that also is part of the flow of the evolution of consciousness, that the reason that we disidentify with something is that it stops working. It creates some kind of stress where we say, wait, is there something more? And the division going on in the world, especially the West, I think is part of that, that it's the evolutionary process of breaking down identifications. And who wrote the book, Who Moved My Cheese?
I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's all about change, right? We are resistant to change, the natural tendency for human beings. So when the change is happening, on one side, they resist the change. They say, no, we don't want things to change. And on the other side, they say, we don't want things to stay the same. They're just stuck in a world that is falling apart. That is it's going to redefine itself in a way, hopefully with fewer labels, and then fewer labels, and then fewer labels. Right? It will be. It's just part of the evolution
process.
Consciousness.
And next year is the election and all of that.
Oh, don't talk about that.
Yeah. When I was back home, they started showing, I think, the campaign commercials and stuff.
I've already told a couple of friends on Facebook. I said, if we have to go through 18 months of your posts that are so one-sided, I won't unfriend you, but I'm going to block your posts because I don't want to spread that crap. I don't want to go through 18 months of this. I went through it in 2016. Once was enough. No way. I'm not interested.
I got to watch a little bit of a campaign. I won't say whose campaign it was, but I watched about 2 minutes of it and I had like a stomachache. I was like, no, I can't. It's kind of scary. And people are really into it. Like in the crowds and stuff.
Oh yeah. I just wonder how much worse it's going to get.
Yeah. All right. I think that's it for today.
Okay.
Yeah.